Okay, so this is Rachel Blood, and this is my reading workshop strategy lesson. For my lesson, I chose to use the strategy previewing a text. I'm currently in 8th grade and class support teacher, so I work with students in their general ed courses throughout the day. The standard I wanted to meet in this lesson was to read and comprehend texts independently and proficiently. By previewing a text, I wanted my students to activate their prior knowledge. They were able to make predictions about text and monitor those predictions, and I want them to become more successful independent readers overall. The authentic text that I chose for this was a DBQ, which means document-based questions packet, and the topic was Declaration of Independence because that is what we were currently discussing in class at the time. For my connection, I actually used an analogy. So I had the students work in small groups and pretend that they were thieves. I wanted them to think about all of the things they would plan out before a robbery. So over here on the left-hand side, you can see some student examples of what they wanted to consider before their robbery so that they could get the most out of it and be the most successful. I then connected and linked that idea to the fact that when they're reading and before they get started working on primary and secondary sources and documents, they needed to work like thieves. They needed to plan and look at all of the different text features and aspects of the documents before they began reading so that they could get the most out of it and have the easiest time comprehending what they were looking at. So metacognitive awareness, previewing a text, aims at checking, planning, and monitoring. So by them planning and monitoring what text features they're looking at, it's helping to improve their metacognitive awareness. Also, successful readers, according to Almasi and Fullerton, have an awareness and control over their skills, and they engage them before, during, and after reading. So I bolded before because that is the time period of their reading that they are focusing on. So here is just a video of my connection. I'm going to skip over some parts just to save some time.
I want you to think about if you were a thief, and this seems off topic right now, but it will make sense later. I want you to think about if you were a thief, and you were going to rob a store, okay? What do you think, guys, what do you think would happen if I didn't make a plan at all before I robbed the store? I probably would get caught, right? On your piece of paper, I want you to think, if you're a thief, what are some things that you're going to think about? What are you going to plan for before you rob a store? Let's call it a jewelry store. Okay? So make a list.
Getaway plan. Go ahead. You got to get all the security cameras.
You know where the doors are.
You're going to be the main expert.
What else? What are you looking for in the store?
I'm going to need money.
Okay, what money?
Inside the jewelry.
It's a jewelry. Okay, maybe specific
The,
kinds of
like the
jewelry.
code. Cameras, security, sound,
Someone to point you out, like an eyewitness. Okay, what about once you get to the store? What are you doing? What do you need to know? Clubs, where security cameras are, and systems. Good. What are you looking for in the store? Jewelry. Specific jewelry? Expensive. Oh, okay, so some that. So I'm gonna make a just general list on the board. Raise your hand. What are some things you guys came up with? We're robbing a jewelry store. What are you gonna think of, Rachel?
We're like sunglasses, maybe a hat.
Okay, you're gonna plan a disguise. That's kind of what they were going for with the shoes, if there is one. Maybe where the safe is. Michael?
Watch out.
Watch out. There are security cameras. Alright, I'm gonna keep this where are security cameras. We said security guards. What else do we want to know the location of when we get into the store?
The exits, like the doors.
Exits. What else? Come on, guys.
Like what you want.
Yeah, what we want. What do we want? Yeah, where's the jewelry? What exactly are we looking for? Up there. When we get in the store, we want to go for the jewelry, right? And we want to go for probably the most expensive kind of jewelry. Why? Because you want to get the most out of it, right? Yes. All right. So,
Okay, so then I made a link that you're going to see in the next video to my mini lesson. And throughout my mini lesson, I modeled explicitly what I wanted the students to do. I wrote down on the board the acronym THIEVES up and down, and I explained what each letter of THIEVES represented. I told them I wanted them to look at the titles, headings, introduction, and so on. I thought aloud while I was reading. I told them I'm going to use this to help me find the important parts of the document before I read. I demonstrated as I was reading along, and I had them also record what I was recording on the board to keep them involved in the lesson. I modeled my thinking process. I said when I introduce the title, as I read this title, I'm going to try to figure out what the document is going to be about. I highlighted it. It says, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. So I'm thinking, what is this document going to be about? Probably about equality. I also explained how previewing a text would make my students become a better reader and related that to them being thieves robbing a jewelry store. The more they planned and previewed the sources, the more successful they would be at understanding them. Metacognitive awareness was increased during this. I had them rehearse, I had them record what I was recording on the board. They underlined and highlighted and also annotated and took notes as we went along, as we have practiced since the beginning of the school year in class.
okay? Alright, so like we said, a thief's goal is to get the most out of robbery. So today our goal is going to be to learn how to get the most out of DBQs and primary sources when we're looking at them. Alright, you guys have already done them before, but we're going to learn how to do them better today. Because the more time you take to pick these apart, the easier and the better that they are going to be, and you are going to be more successful at answering questions and doing your essays when we get to them later in the year. Alright? I've come up with a little acronym to help you guys. Alright? Thieves. Cool. When you look at a primary source, before you even read the main chunks, you need to look at some things. You need to look at the title, at the headings, at the intro if there is one. Grab your highlighters. Alright? And we're going to look at document A. Document A, I see the title is my biggest, boldest heading title. Alright? My title here says, we hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal. Sound familiar? Yeah? Highlight it.
Highlighted.
Already, what do you think this document's going to be about?
Preamble.
Just from the title. Equality. Good. Alright? Second thing I'm going to look at. My headings. Whole words. You can just highlight where it says.
Just like notes.
Yeah. Alright? Try to piece that together. Down here, Diana Pham and her husband arrived in Chicago in the 80s from refugee camps in Indonesia and Malaysia. She was recently asked what she appreciated most about her country. So this is probably what she's writing about that. Here, I don't have any visuals or vocab on this one. End of document questions. This one's important because you want to know what you're going to have to look for when you're reading through. So Tyler, can you read me the questions at the bottom? What's number 1?
Which of the 4 beliefs is highlighted in this document?
Okay, which of the 4 beliefs is highlighted? Did we already figure that one out?
Yeah.
Which one? Which of the 4 beliefs is highlighted in this document? We already figured that out from the title. Yeah, all men are created equal or equality. So you guys can already answer that one. Down at the bottom. You can write in equality. Michael, can you read number 2 for me, Benson? going to be kind of the theme of the whole packet, which says what, Devin?
I want to use this document to argue that equality is the most important ideal in the Declaration.
Okay, so I have to try to think about equality being the most important ideal. Good.
Okay, so as I moved on from the mini lesson, I had the students work together to practice this by themselves. Just a note, in my original lesson plan that I submitted, I anticipated using a graphic organizer, but as we worked more throughout the weeks on document analysis like this, I realized that I think that the students would have the same result. I don't think they needed all of that scaffolding, so I just had them jot thieves down in their margin to use it as a checklist. So I had the students working in their small groups to use this new strategy. Almasi and Fullerton stated that when students have the opportunity to interact with one another like this as they process text, they gradually learn how to internalize the principles taught through guided discovery and scaffolding. So I find this to be true constantly in class. I love having my students work together. So here is my clip from that.
You guys take a look at this in your pods, eyes up here. I want you guys to write this on the corner of your page, like in the margin, straight up and down like I did here, and I want you to use it as a checklist. Find the title, highlight it, check it off. Find the headings or the source, if there are any sources. Highlight it, check it off, okay? And then try to answer the questions together. Or you're using it as a checklist so that you remember which aspects you need to look at. Remember that you are doing this before you even get into the bulky main parts of the document, the paragraphs, the pictures, whatever is on the document.
Okay, so my reflection on this lesson, what went right, I feel as if the lesson overall was extremely successful. My connection using thieves made it a memorable strategy, and they had a lot of fun coming up with the different ideas for planning a robbery. As they shared their plans with me and as I made the list on the board, I highlighted the importance of planning the location of various items in the jewelry store, and that made it easier to apply previewing a text to the strategy and locating the various text features within the documents. I also had the students use highlighters to identify the text features. I think that this makes things more concrete for them because they're physically highlighting them and taking a look at them. And this actually attributed to more ease in me assessing them as well because I could make sure and that they were all following the directions. The strategy made the students more mindful of how important previewing was a text, and I think the analogy of thieves and planning helps them to become more metacognitively aware and gain success from this lesson. As also the students, as we progressed throughout the course of that week and looked at other sources, I overheard them talking about using thieves and sounding quite excited about it. So it's definitely a lesson I will use in the future. Next time I teach this lesson, I will introduce each letter of thieves one by one instead of all at once and then going back. I also would physically check off thieves as I model myself, as I expect the students to use thieves as a checklist. That is something I did not do this time. I would also use more positive language as the students share their ideas. I think I was just so focused on getting the lesson out, I kind of, got nervous. And then I would also make sure my phone has enough memory to record because I did run out of space towards the end there. And then my references, Almasi and Fullerton and Irwin were the references that I used throughout this presentation.